Professional athletes, as well as athletes who compete for non-professional teams, do a lot of practice that isn't really the sport they compete in. For example, an American football player doesn't only practice by playing football. Most of their training is spent doing drills, lifting weights, running laps, and so on. Yes, they will play football to practice as well, but most of the time is spent doing exercises. You will find that is the case in pretty much any sport. The better someone is, the more time they devote to these exercises. The reason is quite simple. The sport itself requires a combination of different skills and abilities that need to all work together in harmony. But it is impossible to really get good at any of them if you don't learn and practice them individually. Sure, if someone plays American football for a couple of hours every single day, they'll get stronger faster and have more vitality. But they'll ultimately fall behind someone who spends most 2 hours of daily practice going through a cycle of running, weightlifting, footwork drills, tackles, and so on, with time spent on the sport itself being a couple of hours per week. A football player who is really strong but runs out of breath really quickly will notice that faster if they run laps and then work towards mitigating that. Still, as the player builds each skill, they will eventually put them together and be effective at the sport itself in a way that they are both physically more capable of doing, but also in a way they are able to mentally understand in a better light. They will know what they are good at and maximize the usage of those skills, and then mitigate what they know they haven't quite mastered yet. Don't worry, this channel is still about writing, and this video is about journaling. Most writing advice online tends to just tell newer writers to read more and practice every day, and like most advice online, it's not wrong, but it's also not helpful. Yes, reading more and practicing every day will make you a better writer, but it does matter what you're reading and how you're practicing. My goal today is to explain the latter. I want to tell you what this practice actually looks like, and how to maximize its effectiveness in growing your writing skill. And the most effective practice is journaling. A lot of newer writers might easily fall into the trap of thinking they can only write projects. You know, the mentality of, I need to write every day, so I need to make progress on my novel every day. Or, I need to make a new short story every day. Inevitably, you won't be able to keep up with those standards. More experienced writers can get much closer to that type of schedule, but they know who they are already. If you're new to writing, you can take a deep breath and not stress out about that right now. Instead, I want you to start journaling every day and make progress on your draft every week for the time being. Journaling is not writing diary entries. Diaries chronicle what happens in a day. Journals do more. Yes, some journal entries will look like diary entries, but not all of them. You can take one day to outline a random story you had. The next day you can try your hand at poetry. The next, write as if you're describing a smartphone to Ronald Reagan. Eventually, you can work towards exercises like writing a 200-word story, using only the first 50 words that appear in different orders. I can hear the objections now. You stupid orange dog, that sounds like wasting valuable time that could be spent on an actual draft. False. That's like telling a football player that they are wasting their time lifting weights instead of playing football. If all you do is work on drafts of real projects, then inevitably you will smack into your own skill ceiling and you will find yourself lacking the skills to complete your own story. The point about journaling is that it isn't a serious project. You can experiment and push boundaries. Who cares if the result is subpar? It's a journal, only you will read it. And when one out of a bunch of entries leads to interesting results, you can then look at why it worked and use that lesson when you're writing a real story. Let's look at my earlier examples. If you write an entry that is a dialogue between you and Ronald Reagan and you're explaining the smartphone to him, that's great practice for a few general skills. If you write science fiction or high fantasy, having to explain something that's completely foreign to someone else is part of the job. You have to know more about the character you're talking to know where the common ground will be. Then, with the example of the 200-word story using only the first 50 words that appear, it will teach you about how to be efficient with your vocabulary and how to push your language skills to their limits. It's not useless to practice these things, and you would be hard-pressed to find opportunities to practice thoroughly unless you are out of the drafting environment. The general recommendation is to do your journaling on actual paper with a pen or a pencil. Don't roll your eyes, there are reasons. The first one is that your keyboard has backspace. Editing practice journal entries misses the point. It's about getting stuff out of the abstractions of your head and putting it on the page. Digital files make it way too easy to keep going back and trying to edit everything. Secondly, and this is assuming you do your main writing projects digitally, you are probably subconsciously programmed to take writing seriously, and that kind of stress won't help your journaling. If it's on paper, you know that it isn't your actual story, so you will relax and practice properly. You don't have to make this too complicated. A spiral notebook and random pencil is perfectly adequate. But I will admit, it's hard to be inspired by lowest spec items. I'm a bit extra when it comes to the stuff I use, so I journal on Luke Term 1917 notebooks and Blackwing pencils. I'm showing the backs of them because my real name is on the front of them. The actual experience is a lot nicer doing it like this, but it's definitely more expensive. Still, it's not a waste of money if it improves your experience. Just keep in mind that you don't have to spend this kind of money. A $2 notebook from Walmart and a pencil you find on the ground, it'll do the job. Eventually, once you're used to it, keeping up a writer's journal becomes so easy that it feels a lot more like recreation than work. You'll be able to spend an hour on it and feel energetic enough to then spend the same or more amount of time on an actual draft. If that seems like a lot of time, I have a bit of a challenge for you. Keep track of how much time you spend on your phone for a day or two, whether it's on Discord, Twitter, TikTok, whatever it is. I guarantee for most of you that the time you tally will be a lot more than an hour. It's the same for me. Doing something well requires sacrifice and diligence. To return to my sports example, athletes that want to compete at the highest level sacrifice time every day to train and practice that could have otherwise been spent online. I challenge you to do the same. Once you get going, it's much easier than you probably imagine it. The main warning here is that while it's easy to do once you do it every day for a few weeks in a row, it only takes one day of not doing it to make it difficult again. Once you miss one day of journaling, it's really hard to get back into the pattern. But the self-control to keep yourself pushing forwards is the type of fortitude that is completely necessary to be a working writer. It's a lot of upkeep, but it is worth it. If you plan on studying creative writing in college, starting your writing journal now will be very helpful. Some professors will actually require their students to start them, so if you're already doing it, then you will be quite a bit ahead of your classmates. Even if your professor doesn't require it, just having a practice like that will make the quality of your work a cut above your classmates, which will in turn give you other benefits such as actually learning and implementing the new ideas about writing you hear from the class. Eventually, you'll start giving yourself your own exercises to do while you journal, but I'm going to start you off with some and explain the skills you'll learn by doing them. Just avoid overdoing them. Do one each day, but don't do multiple in a day. Number 1. Describe a luscious jungle without the word green. This is an easy one. What you'll be practicing is improving story flow by removing unnecessary detail. If I simply say, a healthy jungle, the reader will already be imagining a lot of green. It is just simply unnecessary for me to say that it is green. Write about what your readers don't know, not what they do know. If you actually write about a jungle in a story, will you use the word green? Probably. But again, this is about practice. Number 2. Pick one of the protagonists you currently use. Write dialogue that is you summarizing this video to them. Make sure they react and respond in the most accurate way you can write. This exercise will teach you a lot about character development, dialogue, and exposition. I'm assuming this video has nothing to do with any plot you're currently writing, so most of it should be very new information to them that they might not understand. That will help you get better at conveying lots of new information in a way that isn't just dumping exposition. Number 3. Take a section of your own writing and change the point of view. So, if it was first person, write it in third. If it was in third, write it in first. If it's in second, then pick one of the other two. The rule is that it can't just be word swapping. No content can be lost. If there were internal thoughts that convey information in first person, then you must find some way to express that information in another way. This exercise will help you fully understand the requirements of each point of view, and will better inform you on how to tell your stories. Number 4. Go to a public place. It can be school, work, library, restaurant, bar, cafe, whatever you want. Write a character based on the first sentence you overhear. Then, write a second character based on something new you overheard from a different conversation. Make these two new characters go on a fictional date. This exercise is a fascinating experiment with character development. It forces you to learn where the characters have realistic common ground enough to be on the date, but provides enough conflict that the scene can be really interesting. Number 5. Pick one of the scenes you've written before. Now write it again in a new setting that is a completely different mood. Did the original scene take place at a cafe? Do it again at a highway truck stop. Did the original scene take place at a graveyard? Do it again at a water park. This exercise both teaches you about the importance of a good backdrop, but also emphasizes that scenes that are in a less obvious pick are usually a lot more interesting. You can make a water park creepy or a funeral cheerful and so on. Often the intended mood is even more pronounced if the scene is in an odd place. Those are 5 of the ideas I've had. From there, I hope you can see how the exercises are supposed to work, and you can try coming up with your own. I encourage that any ideas you do come up with, that you can just throw them in the comments section. I don't know, I think it would be kind of cool to see more from other people. They're not supposed to be easy, and in fact, they're supposed to take some time of thought before you even start writing, but they're not impossible. Plus, because the exercises are only for your benefit, you don't have to worry about other people reading the entries, which means that you can kind of just simply not edit any of it. Just write the exercises. If the result isn't readable, that's okay. And with that, keep writing. Shorter video today, I know. I canceled one of the other 2 videos I was working on, and adjusted the other one into this one, but also shortened it a little bit. Work has been busy lately. But I haven't quit. I'm doing video stuff whenever I get the chance. More videos will be coming soon.